What's up, guys? This is Scott with Portal Pros, and today we're doing our first install on a customer vehicle, and we're going to walk you through step by step, go through the instruction manual, and show you how to install your portals on your Jeep Gladiator, or I guess also Wrangler as well. Pretty much the same thing. All right, so we have everything laid out just to kind of show what comes as part of the total kit. So we've got our brake lines, our rear axle shafts. So these are actually the front and rear brake lines. We've got our rear axle shafts. We've got the 4 portals, and these actually come with the mount plates temporarily installed. So you'll remove these before installing onto the vehicle. 2 quarts of 75 weight 90 synthetic gear oil. All of our hardware kits labeled front, rear, your stub shaft nut, the outer dust covers, parking brake calipers with your brackets. And then again, labeled hardware kits, support brackets. So these are going to be for the front. These are the bolt-on option for the rear for Gladiators. And then we also have a weld-on option that's more universal. So if you wanted it to be a little bit more secure, a little bit more permanent, you can weld onto your rear axle here. Our ABS lines that, or ABS sensors that replace the rear ABS sensors. Additional hardware for making the parking brake setup work. And then our spares kit. So there's a couple things that we'll touch on that are in here. Like some Loctite and some O-rings that will be part of the install. But basically this is just to bring on the trail so that if you end up having an O-ring crap out or whatever, you can just get you home. Okay, so now we've got everything laid out, ready to be installed. Time to get the vehicle up in the air and take the wheels off so that we can start installing the brake lines, which is the first step in our instruction manual. So after getting our wheels and tires off, the first step is going to be removing all the factory brake lines, or even if you have extended brake lines, because of the way the portal sits, you're going to want to go with our brake lines that are long enough. The typical extended ones are usually not quite long enough. So here we go. We're going to remove the brake lines, and then we'll bleed all the brakes, and then we'll start the portal install. These are the new front brake lines fully installed. 2 things to note here. First, the front brake lines are side specific, so double check that the mount bracket matches the line you removed before installing the new brake lines. Second, there are thicker and thinner copper washers, and you want to make sure the thicker copper washer is against the caliper face to ensure the fitting is spaced out properly. So we just got the rear brake line off on this side. We're about to put in our new replacement line. So again, these are going to be a bit longer than your typical extended brake lines just because the portal pushes everything down and the brake ends up a little bit lower. So you definitely want to use our lines. So we'll get those on and then we'll bleed the brakes. You'll see us realize this later in the video, but we initially installed the rear brake lines in the wrong orientation and ended up fixing them after installing the portal. What's shown here is the correct orientation where the brake line is pointing up with the caliper installed on the portal. Okay, so we've got all the brake lines installed, and now we're going to get some fluid in the reservoir and start bleeding the brakes. All right, so we have the brake lines installed and bled, and now the next thing we're gonna do is start tearing the front down. And in the instructions, we actually have it just the fronts, and then you do the front portal install, and then the rears are separate. In this case, since we have the whole vehicle lifted up, we're just gonna tear down the front and the rear at the same time. So we'll jump over there in a second. All we're going to do is remove the front brake caliper and then the 3 bolts for the unit bearing on the backside. We'll pull that out, leave the axle shaft in place. Oh yeah, and this nut, the axle shaft nut. So yeah, just get it to where there's a bare knuckle with an axle shaft sitting in there, and then we're ready to start installing the portals. So we got the front unit bearing and brakes removed. Now the knuckle's ready to accept the mounting plate. And one thing I want to point out here is we're going to reuse the front ABS sensor, the OEM one. We're going to take a look at that O-ring in a minute and see if we need to replace it. And then also on certain aftermarket knuckles, these this upper boss for the dust cover shield might need to be filed down or ground down a little bit just to clear your wheel depending on how much wheel offset you have. So just double check that before you go drive anywhere. Similar to the front, we're basically just going to get everything out of the way of the axle housing. So we're going to remove the 4 bolts on the back of the flange, we're going to remove the caliper, and then the entire axle shaft, brake rotor, and brake caliper will get out of the way, and then we're ready to start installing the portals. everything removed from the rear axle in order to get the portal in. We've got the parking brake removed from the little clip. We've got the original ABS sensor, which is going to get fully replaced, off, and then the axle shaft and the backing plate as well as the caliper are off and out of the way. So now we're ready to install the portal or the mounting plate onto the axle flange. We also need to take the bearing race out. It does technically fit in there and you could leave it, but better to take it out than leave it. So we'll grab that as well. So we have the Jeep completely torn down, ready to go for the portal install. So now we just got to take a few things off of the portals so that they can get put onto the axles. So these are both of our front portals. And we have these labels here to remind you to remove the mount plate. And so we ship the portals with the mount plate installed just so the hardware is already there, so you don't have to go looking for it. We just got to remove these 4 upper bolts and then these 2 lower bolts. And basically the simple way to remember this is if it's torque painted, it stays on. If it's not torque painted, it comes off. So pretty straightforward. So we got these 4 upper bolts, 2 lower bolts, and then the brake caliper adapter in the front will stay on. You're not going to touch that. In the rear, we'll go over it, but you are going to end up taking that off and retorquing these bolts at the end. So let's take these off. But now our adapter plates come off. Adapter plates come off. And then, yeah, we'll be able to get these mounted onto the knuckles and the portals will go on afterwards. Using our front mount plate hardware kit. So we've got 1 hardware kit for each front portal. Same thing with the rear. Again, these are labeled Jeep front hardware kit. Trying to make it easy. So we'll go over that as we install them. So we're going to put our front mount plate on and show you which bolts go where. So this is the front mount plate. You'll notice there are twice as many holes as you need. And we did that so that this part is mirrored on the other side. So it's left and right of the same plate. You just got to pay attention to which orientation, because you can technically install this the wrong way. Basically, the one that looks more vertical is correct, and you'll see it in the instructions. So it shows the correct and the incorrect ones. And then we've got our bolts that are going to go in here, and nuts that go on the back side. So it's kind of the reverse of the OEM unit bearing, where the bolt comes in from the back. So you're just going to hold the nut, and then we'll torque those down once you get all of them in. Oh, wrong one. Oh, and one thing to double check here is, because we haven't had a chance to check this on every single aftermarket knuckle, or even honestly all the OEM knuckles, just make sure it's sitting completely flush once you tighten it down. I can see in this one, it looks very flush, but there may be a case where you might have to file off some of the knuckle just to make sure that the mount plate fits. And then as we go, we'll figure that out, make sure there's enough clearance for all the knuckles, but just at this point, we're not 100% sure. Okay, so then we're going to torque these bolts to 85 foot-pounds, and we're actually going to use the torque wrench on the backside to make sure that the nut is torqued correctly. Sometimes these grab because they're countersunk bolts, so we want to make sure we get the threads torqued correctly. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention on the bench is we do also ship with an extra 6mm screw or hex bolt for the ABS sensor, because it's actually impossible to get a Allen key type screw out or in with the portal installed, so we replace it with that. So now all we got to do, take the portal, and this is labeled Jeep front passenger. And that basically means that the brake caliper adapter is on the back side. On the rear, get this to line up. Oh, there it goes. And boom, portal on. Let me get the hardware. So just get one bolt on here, somewhat loose, just so it doesn't go anywhere. And now we can start to get the rest of the hardware on there. So we've got our 3 M12 by 45mm screws. And then we've got 2 M12 by 25mm screws that go in the back. just keeping them kind of loosely tight, and then we'll torque them at the end. Torque them now is what the instructions say, so we're going to do that. Okay. Said 75. Especially with this big monster. God, it's so weird with such a long torque wrench. For these ones, they're going into the steel mount plate. That's why the torque setting is higher at 75 foot-pounds. In the rear, they're going into the aluminum case. So we said it's 50 foot-pounds, which I need to adjust. Okay. So now the portal is on there, more or less installed, and we got to do all of the extraneous stuff that goes with it. Next step is our lower support bracket. So first thing we got to do is remove the cotter pin and the lower ball joint nut. Don't ask me how many times I've reused my cotter pins. It's too many. That's why I hire a mechanic, not an engineer. Am I going the wrong way? Definitely going the wrong way. Cut that part out. Okay, so we're just going to leave this here and grab our lower support bracket. And hope that that fits. Oh, come on. Oh, no. All right, this one's a little tight. We're just going to... There it is. Don't worry about the paint. It's all good. It's an off-road rig. Nut back on here. All right, and our other bolts going in here to the portal. And these are the same exact bolts that go on the lower part of the support bracket, or the mount plate. Just keeping things nice and easy and consistent. Okay, maybe it's just easier to do by hand. Okay. These are also 50. No, it's actually a problem. Okay, well, note that down in the design. Yeah, okay, so we weren't able to fit the existing, or the exact sockets that we have, but it's just good and tight. And then we're gonna tighten this guy up. And this one's supposed to be 60, right? Torque our lower ball joint, and then hope that we can see some cotter pin holes, which we cannot. As always. Yay. So because certain ball joint manufacturers make the studs a little bit of a different length, put their cotter pin holes in a bit different spot. So like the ones that we've been using, the metal cloak ones, they have a little bit of a lower cotter pin hole. We ended up just having to drill another hole towards the end of the stud here. And so the cotter pin will fit through. There's two holes on this one, but they both are too high up for when we put the lower support bracket on. So we just drilled a hole, just took a couple minutes, and now we're good to go. So we'll get that torqued and get the cotter pin in there. A little bit more. Wow, that is a long cotter pin. Cut those off. Those are really long. Okay, beautiful. That was easier than expected. Okay, so now we got the portal mounted, all the bolts torqued. We got the lower support bracket mounted and torqued. Next step is going to be putting our stub shaft nut on there. And so we ship it pre-assembled with this little locking ring and snap ring on there. So I'm going to take that off. And so that you don't have to cut the end of the stub shaft or anything like that. This just fits with the OEM stub shaft. The reason we replace it from the OEM one, it doesn't fit the OEM, and then also two, we had an O-ring on here to prevent oil from getting out at the end of the portal. And we said 100 foot-pounds, right? Joseph, stop knowing our instructions better than us. All right, you want to hold that? Straighten it out and then shove that guy in there. Trim out the way. Okay. So now we've got our stub shaft nut torqued and in there. We're going to add our locking mechanism. So that'll fit over. And sometimes you'll have to rotate it just to make sure it actually goes in there. Well, that was pretty lucky. So it slides in. You want to make sure it's sitting basically flush with the input gear. But basically once that's in there, the nut won't be able to come loose. And then we retain that with a snap ring right here. And you just want to push it in until it clicks, make sure it's on there. So the snap ring will, move around a little bit, but as long as it's clipped in there, it's not going to come out. Thus the locking mechanism won't come out. Thus your stub shaft nut won't come out, which is really important, as I found out at a wheeling trip one time. So then once that is torqued, the stub shaft nut is torqued, we've got our locking mechanism on there, the snap ring's in there, then we just got to put our dust cover over top. And there's an O-ring for sealing for oil, preventing oil coming out. And sometimes they're a little tricky to get in there. Just kind of hold it in place. And then grab our snap ring pliers. And shove this guy in here. And sometimes you just need to give it a little. Woo! I'm not going to capture it. All right, get in there. Okay. So once that's in there, it's not all the way in there. We're going to basically just give this a little tap until it goes all the way. Hear that click? Yeah, and you can see it separate, and now it's fully in there, not going anywhere. All right, so we include a spares kit. It's got a bunch of random stuff, some hardware, an extra vent hose, the Loctite we'll need later for the brakes, but also spare seals and O-rings. And again, just various stuff that while we were doing a bunch of prototyping, we had issues here and there, and just one of those things where if you have the O-ring or the seal with you and you have an issue, it's no big deal to fix it, but when you're caught without it, you're kind of in a bad situation. So we toss them in there. We found that the OEM sensors, the OEM O-rings that come on the sensors, they sometimes get cut when you install them into the portal. We're not sure if it's just like the material or whatever, but these are actually designed for keeping grease in, not necessarily keeping oil in. So if they look like they're intact, you can use them, but we threw in a few different options for replacing those O-rings and then also kind of a backup face seal, just so that, again, if you have an issue where you accidentally cut the O-ring install, we've got a backup plan for you. All right, so we've got our option 1 O-ring here. And that's just going to slide into the same OEM location. This grease actually is going to help us out, which is great. And then we've got another O-ring that we're going to add that's going to slide to the base of the ABS sensor. And we're doing that, again, just as kind of a secondary backup. In case you have issues with this one during install, we've got that, and it should prevent any leakage in the future. And these ones are specifically labeled as ABS face seal. So yeah, this second O-ring is a little bit bigger, and it goes past the OEM location. And again, it's just going to act as kind of like a face seal as opposed to a bore seal like the OEM one. And now we're going to sneak this guy in here. Oh, down here. Oop, like that. That guy. Oh, I need the bolt too. So the bolt's kind of got to go at the same time. And this bolt is the same one that we were provided and removed earlier. So now we're going to gently wiggle this guy in here. You know what? That option 1 O-ring might not work. So this is why we gave 2 options, just because we weren't sure yet. This is all part of the validation. So we're going to swap that out for the option 2 O-ring. I think that's probably the better bet. It's a little bit smaller. We weren't so sure about this. Again, last minute, decided this makes sense to do this. Okay, so we've got our option 2 O-ring on there now. Okay, that should slide in there. Oh, there it goes. So once it's partially in there, then you want to get the screw started. Okay, so don't tighten that too much. It's just an M6 screw, so don't go too crazy. So yeah, we've got now the secondary O-ring is kind of just squeezed between the flange on the ABS sensor and the outer part of the portal. Like I keep saying, just kind of a backup setup. It will be a little bit tilted, but the O-ring should be compressed on there pretty well. If you're concerned about that, you can throw a little washer underneath the where the bolt goes through, and that'll kind of flatten things out. But we've tried this, it seems to work okay, so we're gonna stick with that. Cool, so ABS sensor, done. Next thing, so we're installing our vent bellows and vent hoses and then filling the portal with oil. So we've got everything sealed up now, and we just gotta start routing our vent lines. And then we got some zip ties in here, and we also have hose clamp. So we cut the hoses pretty long. just because we weren't sure what everyone's setup was going to look like. So we're going to kind of fit where this needs to go, and then we'll figure out how much extra we need, how we want to route this. We'll cut it to length, and then we'll install it on the hose barb that's back here with our hose clamp. So we cut off like, what, maybe 3 or 4 inches of the hose, routed it through as best we could, and then we'll throw a couple more zip ties. So we zip tied here, here, and then up here at the top. And there's a little bit of slack, but we're fully drooped out, so should be plenty. I'll go ahead and tighten this guy. And these things don't need to be crazy tight, so should be good. And then got another zip tie. Go like this. And so you just want to make sure that your hoses aren't going to get, especially rubbed by the tire. I've had that happen to my Jeep before, where I didn't route them well, and then eventually wore through and started leaking oil. You know, not a big deal to replace, but it's pretty annoying when your wheel's completely covered in oil. Okay, so we've got hose routed here, zip tied 1, 2, 3, 4 places, vent below up out of the way. Yeah, now it's time for the brakes. We're installing the front brakes. We're gonna put the rotor on. You don't have to worry about the little screw anymore. Okay, I'm gonna get our caliper on. In the front, the caliper gets mounted to the adapter bracket with the portal, or with the adapter bracket mounted to the portal. And then we've got our 2 M14 bolts that are replaced here. I swear this is the most annoying. What? What did I do wrong? Oh, Loctite? Oh yeah, that's important. Loctite, just like in the instructions, which I'm totally following. Yeah, so with the anything brakes wise, we're telling you to put Loctite on, because we don't want you to have problems with brake bolts. Oh, and I got it all on my fingers now. Just judging me. All right, second bolt, adding our Loctite. Okay, finally, after much struggle. Okay, and then we torque these to the factory spec of 148 foot-pounds. Oh yeah. Okay, done? Yep. Now just oil? Oh, you skipped the step. I skipped the step. I got too excited. I'm so bad at following instructions. Oh, nice. Not too tight.
Slightly more difficult because the brakes are in the way.
Whatever. All right, and then we're just gonna fill until it is full and coming out a little bit. I would recommend having a rag underneath here. It's hard to tell when it's gonna happen. Like that. All right, and then we recommend just waiting like 20-30 seconds, let the oil kind of drain down. There's just a few like little pockets and areas to get through, and then do it again, double check, make sure that it's completely full up to here, and then seal it up and we're done. All right. We somehow missed the fill plug install, but you'll just replace that after confirming the portal is full and snug it down so the copper washer fully seals. So now we're on to the rear portals after getting the front portals installed. And we got a similar thing. We're gonna remove the adapter plate or mount plate, again, because we ship it installed. And this is just to make it a little easier in terms of organizing the hardware. Get that off. Yeah. Sometimes these ones get a little stuck. There it goes. And one thing to specifically watch out for in the rear is we have this sealing O-ring in the back, which we actually damaged. Nice. Good news is we put a couple of spares in the spares kit, so we'll go ahead and get that replaced. But just make sure, they do tend to want to fall off. So, but yeah, in this case, it was already damaged, so that's why I put spares in. The other thing we want to do is remove our ABS bolt. And then we're going to take our rear axle shaft and pre-install it so it's ready to go, just so when we put it into the axle, everything will just kind of go in at one time. But part of the packaging we put these 2 snap rings on here, which will go in for the final install, but we need to remove the smaller one for the initial install. So this guy's just going to insert here. Oh, and yeah, I guess pay attention to the side with no snap rings is the side that goes into the differential. The side with snap rings is the side that goes into the portal. Should be pretty obvious because the spline count is going to be different. So that's on there. And then I need to get my hardware kit. So we've got our Jeep rear hardware kit, and that includes our custom retaining ring, again, labeled. And so this is just a seal ring so that oil does not escape into the splines. So we've got a couple O-rings on there. You'll just push this right over top of the shaft and make sure that it sinks all the way in. Sometimes you gotta kind of push the shaft through, and then the snap ring groove will be available. And make sure it's all the way there. Okay, so now our axle shaft is ready to go. We're gonna put our outboard dust cover on. And these outboard dust covers are the exact same front and rear. So don't panic if you accidentally grab the one out of the box from the fronts. There you go. That snaps right in there. And now this is almost ready for install. One more thing to check here is our ABS sensor. We provide the ABS sensors from the rear. These are exactly the same as the front ABS sensors. We just replaced the old style rear ones. And again, we're a little skeptical about the OEM O-rings, so we're just gonna go ahead and replace that and put the secondary O-ring as well. Got our ABS number 2 spare, and we'll slide that onto our new ABS sensor. And then we've got our ABS face seal washer, or O-ring, excuse me. Again, just repeating, this is sort of a backup plan in case you do have issues accidentally cutting the bore seal washer. And then we're going to push this in, just give it a little wiggle. Should slide in there. Okay. And then we're going to take our bolt that we just took off, tighten that guy. And all right. So now that's on there. And now let's go work on installing our rear adapter plate. Okay, so we're here on gonna do the rear mount plate install. We've got our hardware kit. First, we're just gonna press this on. So we kind of showed it when we were removing the plate from the portal that we damaged this O-ring. Again, we throw a couple of spares in just in case for something like this, because we know that kind of stuff can ruin your day, or it could be really no big deal. Double check that there is an O-ring on the inside here. That is gonna seal, so we kind of need both of those seals to make sure oil doesn't come out of the differential and leak past the portal. So I'm just gonna go over here, push this thing in. Takes a little bit. Okay, so the O-ring's not quite pushed past, but when we bolt it in, it will get into place. Our 12 by 45 millimeter bolts. I'm just gonna put the upper ones in because there's another piece that needs to go in the lower ones. And this is just gonna hold this on for now so we don't accidentally drop it. Oops. Our pulley bracket, this is for the parking brake. And you really don't wanna forget to put this on when you're doing the rest of it, because if you get it on and get the portal on, then realize you don't have this mounted, you'll have to take the whole portal off to be able to get to the screws to mount this guy. So make sure and pay attention, get this on. We do have them labeled in the box, but the thing to keep in mind is the pulley is going to go towards the front of the vehicle on both sides. Bolts through here and here. Get our nut on here. Thank you, Matt. And the convenient thing is these bolts are the exact same bolts that the portal mounts with. So if you accidentally mix up the ones that hold the plate or the portal to the plate, it's no big deal because they're the exact same.
£75
75. So now that those are partially tightened, we're going to torque these. There's not any particular order, so don't stress about that. Oh, wow. we've got our mount plate installed. We've got our O-ring on here. We double checked, it's intact. And now we're gonna put the portal in. So when you're going in, it's gonna eventually hit a wall. You just gotta make sure the axle shaft kind of makes it into the differential. There we go. And make sure you're not smashing your ABS sensor. Oh. There you go. Portal on. Again, 45 millimeter M12 bolts, same as the ones that we're using on the mount plate. And we'll just get those kind of started here so this thing doesn't fall off. And then we'll just kind of partially get them on here. But we don't recommend tightening it too much until you get all 6 bolts on. So we've got our 4 front or outer bolts, and then we've got the 2 25 millimeter M12s that are going to go in the back. And these are going to be the same front or rear, so should be pretty obvious by the time you make it to the rear. Again, just going to give it a little bit, not too crazy. Oh, this one doesn't reach. All right, and then we're going to torque these. So same as the front, the upper ones are going to be 75 foot-pounds. Backside ones, we're going to go to 50 foot-pounds. All right, so now the portal is mounted to the mount plate. All right, now the portal is installed. We got to connect our new ABS sensor. We already removed the old one from the connector up here, but yeah, in this case, you may need to remove it if you haven't done so already. And nice. There it is. Is it in there? So then once it clicks in, there's a red tab as well. It's very hard to see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so you got to click that red tab in there, make sure that stays held in. And then we'll deal with routing this guy when we're routing the bent hose. So similar to the other side, we're going to zip tie the bellow up in position before we finish connecting to the portal, just so that we can cut off any excess that we have. Don't be jealous. And then we'll just give it a little bit of a loop here. Call it there. So that's, yeah, that should be, because we're fully drooped. Oh yeah, that's also true. If you can't tell, we're not used to having a lift. So yeah, cut off, I don't know, 15 inches or so. Got our hose clamp here. I've got my tools. Okay, should be good. So next step is we're going to install our parking brake bracket. And again, we've got our hardware kit. It says parking brake hardware. Pretty straightforward. This guy's going to go on here. And you'll notice these are button head screws. We did that specifically so that you wouldn't confuse these bolts with anything else. And they're a little bit lower profile to clear the brake rotor. Get this tightened up. Torque these to 75 foot-pounds. Matt, I'm noticing a theme here. We only have like 2 or 3 torque settings. Isn't that convenient? So that's our parking brake caliper, or parking brake caliper bracket. So after installing our parking brake bracket, we're going to go ahead and install our rear caliper. And this is going to be a little bit confusing because of the way that our bracket works. There's these spacers, there's these different bolts. So we'll kind of walk through it step by step. So first things first is we ship the with the parking brake adapter bracket installed onto the portal just loosely. So you'll notice there's no torque paint on the bolts going in this direction. Same thing on this side. So first we're going to leave the bracket on here and take out our 30 millimeter hex bolts with these little spacers on them. And then we'll grab our caliper. And specifically, we do not want to put the rotor on yet because this is going to come off in just a second. We got to take our spacers off the bolts. The bolt is going to go through the hole, and then the spacer is going to go on the back side. And we do that specifically to face off against the non-machined surface on the back of the caliper. Then we'll install the caliper and the rotor together with the bracket already attached to the caliper. So let me get this other one on here. Bolt through, washer or spacer on. And oh, I guess I should also point out there's a few other threaded holes that are right next to the ones that we're going to use. They already have the bolts in the way, so you won't be able to get in there. So just use the 2 threaded holes that are not currently being used. And then ignore the through holes. Those are just for the front. We just reuse this bracket front and rear. Oh, I may have need to reorient this brake. It's just like right on the verge. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and I forgot Loctite again. Dang it. Don't forget the Loctite. What is this one torque to? 75. It's convenient. Okay. So then now we've got, hey, keep it down out there. We've got the caliper mounted to the bracket, and now we're going to take the bracket off so we can put the rotor on at the same time as the caliper. Good, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to need Loctite on this side. We'll figure that out. Perfect. And I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do one to hold it in place, and then I'll torque, or I'll put Loctite on all of them. Screw here. And then we're going to torque these down. Would you believe it? 75 foot-pounds. Okay, so next step is, I think, e-brake. That's right. I knew that. Now we're going to install the parking brake caliper. Thanks to my director over here.
11.1.
Step 11.1. Can you believe there's 11 steps and we haven't messed anything up yet? Just kidding, we did. We're going to slide this guy on here. And there's 2 3/8 bolts that go in from the back side. And I have an 8 millimeter, 5/16. Oh, or this. Look at this guy.
5/16 stuff. Wow.
Okay, wow. This is what's great about working or doing this at a shop. We have 14 different options. One thing to pay attention to on this install is there is a slot in the mount for the from the bracket to the actual caliper, and you just want to make sure and set that up where the brake pads are getting full contact with the rotor, but the rotor is not touching the pins going through the caliper. Ask us how we know. So yeah, just leave like maybe an 1/8 of an inch gap, something like that, and make sure that you're not going to have contact with the rotor when it's going around. And now we're going to install the emergency parking brake extension that we provide. We don't actually replace the entire parking brake cable. We did that originally in our prototype and decided we hated doing it and didn't like how the parking brake engaged, wasn't really grabbing enough. So instead, we're keeping the OEM cable and adding an extension. And then we also made a shorter version of this little lever arm so you get a better grab from the OEM handle and cable. Our extension is basically going to feed through here. And then we're going to set my tools down here. We're going to fold the OEM cable back on itself and zip tie it out of the way. And that's kind of creating a nice little loop for us. All right, so that holds there. And now our cable is going to get bolted with this U-bolt. So now this U-bolt is going to go like this. And we're going to put this guy here. this. Actually, I guess it should probably be like this, huh? Easier to access. All right, so then let's put our bolts on, then we'll kind of finalize the position of the cables. Make sure that cables are not kind of overlapping each other. Make sure this guy gets in, yeah, like that. There we go. So, and tighten this one. All right, then we're gonna tighten these guys up. You're going to get these nice and tight because they are your parking brake. Okay. So that's on there. And we'll cut the zip tie later. And now we're going to do the rest of the extension. So I need we have a 6mm T-handle. 5mm is what I said. So then we're going to loosen up our little clamp here. Ooh, Joseph, could I get some pliers too? Or needle nose, it doesn't really matter actually. Thank you. We're gonna send our cable through our little clamp here. And then grab this guy, give it a little pull. It doesn't need to be, oops. Doesn't need to be crazy tight, but just get a little tension on it. And then clamp these guys down. And again, you're going to want this to be fairly tight because it is your emergency brake / parking brake. Okay, so now we've got our cable routed. We probably could have gone a little tighter on that, but that's okay. Yeah, all right, just retighten it.
It's not going to make a difference in the video if you pull it a little harder.
Depends on the video you're watching. Okay, now we need to tighten or adjust our parking brake. We have our cable now installed, clamped in, and then we need to adjust the position of the piston within the caliper. So that's just this adjustment screw, and then there's this lock nut here. So we're going to hold this in position and tighten this stud until it grips the brake rotor. Okay, so that's fully gripped. So right now, effectively, the caliper is fully tightened. You'll see here. And so now what I want to do is back off just a little bit. And this is where you might have to play with it a little bit yourself to get exactly the right setup. But it seems like a couple of turns is about right, where you just get a little bit of wiggle in there. And then you want to see, that might be too much. No, it's not? No. You think that's right?
Yeah, that was about right.
Okay.
Maybe even more.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
As
we'll
long
leave
as
it.
the pads wiggle.
Yeah, if the pad's wiggling a little bit, it's usually enough. It will make a little bit of noise initially until it kind of like seats in. But in our opinion, tighter's better. Then we're going to go ahead and tighten we're going to hold the stud here still and tighten the nut around the stud. Yeah, now I'm doing it on purpose. Get that nice and tight. And then boom, parking brake caliper ready to go. We've got the portal all installed now, including the parking brake, the regular brake caliper, and now we're going to install the lower support bracket. So step one is removing the lower shock bracket, or lower shock bolt, 21mm. There. Oh, this guy's done this before. We like to so we keep the OEM bolt for the shock bracket or shock mount, and then we just flip it around just to make it a little easier for install. So stick that back through. This is nice. Oh, that's dirty. Okay, let me grab the bracket. So this is our bolt-on bracket. So we're going to tie this in on the shock bolt and the back of the portal. I remember struggling with this before because of the weird orientation. Can we have a finagle device? Hammer.
Dead blow hammer. Oh.
There we go.
Oh, the first one?
Oh.
No, you nailed it.
And then these again get torqued to 50 foot-pounds. It's really hard to remember these two numbers. And we retighten the shock bolt. And Joseph, what do you typically torque these to? Good and tight? Okay. Immediately after installing the bolt-on support bracket, we removed it to install the weld-on version. We didn't get much footage, but you start by installing the portal to the mount plate like we showed earlier and bolt the lower plate to the portal. Fit the gusset pieces from the lower plate to your axle housing, which may require some grinding depending on your exact axle and suspension setup. Then grind off the paint from the axle housing and tack the gusset pieces to the housing and lower plate. Once they are tacked in place, remove the portal housing from the mount plate and full weld the gussets to the axle and lower plate. Paint the bracket and reinstall the portal. It was the end of a long day, and we forgot to film the final step of the process, which is filling the portal with oil. The process is the exact same as the front. Remove the fill plug, fill with oil until it drains out, wait 20 to 30 seconds, then fill again until oil drains out. Once the portal is full, go ahead and install the fill plug and tighten it down. We only showed the passenger side install, but the process is the same for the driver's side. Once you have all 4 portals installed, reinstall the wheels, torque the lug nuts, and you're on your way. Check the install instructions for adjusting your tire size to correct the speedometer, as well as the braking procedure for the portals. After 500 miles, change the oil in all 4 portals, and then you'll be good to go.